Hello and welcome to the day after the High Holy Days. Even on the Christian calendar, it's Holy Monday, the day after Palm Sunday. But anyway, thank you very much for sitting through. Uh, Ever since March 20th, we've been or even before that, we've been focusing on the events taking place in 1904 that sort of opened up this whole idea of the change of ages, the change of aeons, and Crowley's revelation uh, in 1904 and the reception of the Book of the Law, which we just finished yesterday. And I promised that I would say a few words today, sort of to recap or to clarify a couple of things uh, that issues that may have arisen as we went through the Book of the Law. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Book of the Law, that third chapter probably freaked you out. It certainly freaked me out when when I first read it. Indeed, I took my little paper copy of the Book of the Law that a friend had brought back all the way from England for me, and I burned it. I followed the instructions and burned it. And I'm sure you can see a YouTube video of a documentary where I described that event. And I've gotten a couple of comments on my Facebook page. People, concerned about eating blood and awful things at the cakes of light and things like that. All I have to say about that is uh, pause for a moment and pretend you're a grown up and look at read the book as what it says. For example, that cakes of light thing, you hear all sorts of terrible rumors about the hosts, the cakes of light at a Gnostic mass, uh, being made of Crowley's fecal matter that it's been freeze dried and stored in black magic places, and or that there's blood, you're eating live living blood. um, just read the thing. For it's for perfume, okay? Mix meal and honey and thick leavings of red wine and oil of bromelain and olive oil and rich fresh blood. And it says what kind of blood? Any kind of blood. But traditionally, okay, incense in religious ceremonies, certain incense has always contained blood, bull's blood for the Mithraic mysteries, the 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 wholesale burning of blood in the Jewish temple service. It's a thing to burn and make smoke out of uh, out of blood. So, in reference to that kind of perfume, uh, yeah, okay, let's just look at it that way. You burn the perfume just like hundreds of other religious forms of worship do. Okay. After it's burned, of this make cakes and eat. Okay. You make your hosts out of whatever you want to make your hosts out of. You can certainly use meal and honey and thick leavings of red wine and all of that. But it's the ash of this make cakes and eat. So if you're worried, again, I go back to the temple worship of Judaism. Uh, there's a sacrificial heifer, a red heifer that is sacrificed, okay, and the heifer and its blood is burned, and the ashes, just a tiny bit of the ashes of the red heifer, is placed in purified water, and it's that water that blesses all of the vessels and implements and vestments of the temple. It's the purifying water. It's not. You're not. I went to a mass where a young man was terrified that he was getting ready to eat, and he says, "Crowley's shit. I don't want to eat his shit." Grow up. Read what it says. Educate yourself about what these things are, and don't be quick to jump to conclusion that you're eating some kind of space alien sperm or bile or anything. Just kind of grow up. Okay, but I digress. I'm going to read you something right out of Crowley's Equinox of the Gods, written around 1920, okay? Because the Book of the Law seems fragmented and confusing, and you don't know who's talking or who's talking to who, and it's very, you're not reading it like a book. A narrative or a instruction book. It's hard, it's confusing, and it's hard to wade through. But remember what is going on here, and for a moment try to put yourself in Crowley's positions, sitting there audibly hearing a spirit voice. And Crowley is so good at putting thoughts to paper that he is actually reacting to what he's hearing, and the voice is hearing what he's thinking and responding to it as they go along. So an example would be in the section where the phrase the house of God. Okay, in the course of the dictation, the phrase or the term house of God is being dictated. And Crowley's mind saying, House of God, that's the name of a tarot card, the tarot card, the Tower. And his mind is wandering a little bit. Crowley's mind is wandering, and he goes off, he digresses. And he goes in his mind thinking, wow, this spirit here is an omniscient being here. I bet this spirit knows what the Golden Dawn did with the tarot attributions vis-a-vis the Hebrew alphabet. I wonder if he knows if it's correct. And then right in the middle of that dictation, right in the middle of that spirit's train of thought, it hears Crowley's digressed thought there and says, oh, all these old letters of my book are right, but Sadi is not the star. He answers that question and then goes on. So as you're reading the book of the law, put yourself in Crowley's mind and think that sometimes the words on the paper are in response to Crowley's unspoken thoughts. And then it starts to make more sense when you think about it as a conversation. It becomes kind of a natural thing. In The Equinox of the Gods, written in 1920, Crowley was still it was only a few years after the dictation of the Book of the Law. Here's what he says about each chapter. And I won't take our time by bouncing back and forth and quoting from each chapter, but let me just read this through. On chapter 1, that starts, Had, the manifestation of Nuit, the unveiling of the company of heaven, every man and every woman is a star, every number is infinite, there is no difference. Help me, O warrior lord of Thebes, in my unveiling before the children of men. Okay, and then it goes down, and all of a sudden, it says, Behold, it is revealed by Aiwass. You go, who's talking here? Okay. Chapter 1. Verse 1, Nuit is the speaker. She invokes her lover and then begins to give a title to her speech in the end of verse 1 through 20. In verses 3 and 4, she begins her discourse. So far, her remarks have been addressed to no one in particular. Verse 4, startled my intelligence into revolt. Verse 4 is, every number is infinite. There is no difference. Verse 4 startled my intelligence into revolt. In verse 5, help me, O warrior lord of Thebes, she explains that she is speaking and appeals to me personally to help her unveil by taking down her message. In verse 6, be thou Hadit, my secret center, my heart, and my tongue. In verse 6, she claims me for her chosen and thinks that I then became afraid lest I should expect to do too much. She answers this fear in verse 7. Behold, it is revealed by Aiwass. By introducing Aiwass as the actual speaker in articulate human accent on her behalf. Can you see how these little notes can be super, super helpful? In verse 8, the oration continues, and now we see that it is addressed to mankind in general. Verse 8, the cobs is in the coo, not the coo in the cobs. This continues till verse 13. And verse 14 is from the stele. And it seems that these quotes from the stele seems to have been written in by me as a kind of appreciation for what she just said. Okay, so those verses that are inserted in the chapters of the Book of the Law aren't being dictated. Crowley inserts them later, and he even thinks, I think I'll insert that, but he doesn't do it at the time. And if you take a look at the facsimile, you won't find those verses written in the facsimile photocopy facsimile of the original at all. In verse 15 emphasizes that it is mankind in general that is addressed. For the beast is spoken of in the third person. Though his was the only human ear to hear the words, at least at that time. Verses 18 and 19 seem almost in the nature of a quotation from some hymn. 18 and 19, while we're at it. Burn upon their brows, O splendorous serpent, O azure-lidded woman, bend upon them. Okay, so almost the nature of a quotation from some hymn. It is not quite natural for her to address herself as she appears to do in verse 19. Verse 26, the question, who am I and what shall be the sign, is my own conscious thought. See? Isn't that nice to know? Okay. In the previous verses, I have been called to an exalted mission, and I naturally feel nervous. This thought is then entered into the record by Aiwass as if it were a story he was telling. And he develops this story after her answer in order to bring back the thread of the chapter to the numerical mysteries of Nuit, begun in verses 24 and 25, and now continued in verse 28. Now, can you see how it would just be insanely helpful to take 15 minutes a day with chapter 1 on one side of your table and this commentary on the other side of the table and just go through it. After a while, the choppiness of the book of the law smooths out, and you can see the flow. Crowley's thought, the reaction to the thought, the dictation, the movement between the God's point of view and the messenger's delivery of the God's thought. It just smooths out. Another doubt must have arisen in my mind in verse 30. And verse 30 says, hang on. This is the creation of the world, that the pain of division is as nothing and the joy of dissolution all. Another doubt must have arisen in my mind at verse 30, and this doubt is interpreted and explained to me personally in verse 31. For these fools of men and their woes care not thou at all. They feel little. What is balanced by weak joys, but ye are my chosen ones. Let's see, which caused me to doubt. She confirms this with an oath, and I was convinced. I swear it by the vault of my body. Let's see here. Yes. Obey my prophet, follow out the ordeals of my knowledge, seek me only. Then the joys of my love will redeem me from all pain. This is so, I swear it by the vault of my body. She confirms this with an oath, and I was convinced. I thought to myself, in this case, let us have written instruction as to the technique. And Aiwass again makes a story out of my request in verse 26. In verse 35, it seems that she's addressing me personally, But in verse 36, she speaks of me in the third person. Verse 40, the word, quote, us, unquote, is very puzzling. Verse 40, let's see if I can quickly find it. Who calls us Phelamites. It apparently means all those who have accepted the law, whose word is thelema. Among these, she includes herself. There is now no difficulty for a long while. It is a general address dealing with various subjects to the end of verse 52. From verse 53 to 56, we have a strictly personal address to me. In verse 57, Nuit assumes her general exhortation. I am spoken of once more in the third person. Verse 61, the word thou is not a personal address. Let's see 61 for us. But to love me is better than all things. Oh, it's Nuit's speech. But to love me is better than all things if under the night stars in the desert thou presently burnest mine incense before me, invoking me with this pure heart and the serpent flame therein. Thou shalt come a little to lie in my bosom. For one kiss will thou then be willing. Okay. In 61, the word thou is not a personal address. It means any single person. So up until then, thou's meant him, and after that, it's not a personal address. It means any single person as opposed to a company. The ye in the third sentence indicates the proper conduct for worshipers as a body. The you in sentence 4 is, of course, applies to a single person, but the plural form suggests that it is a matter of public worship. And here's where people interested in the Mass take note. As opposed to the invocation in the desert of the first sentence of the verse. There is no further difficulty with this chapter. In verse 66, the statement of Iwas that the words of the verse 65 were spoken diminuendo, quietly, down to a pianissimo, indicated with the withdraw of the goddess. So it would be dramatically like let's see, here we go. To me, the manifestation of Nuit is at an end as she fades into smoke. Okay, I just wanted to give you an example. He does the same thing with chapter 2 and chapter 3, just about the same length, just about a page and a half of stuff. But what I want to close today with, because chapter 3 is such a shocker, with all this love is the law, love under will, and put that against kill and torture. Excuse me, and loam in, trample, and blood with spears, It sounds like a wild and crazy, violent temper tantrum God. And remember, this is the aeon of the child. And the formula of the child is not nourishment like the formula of the mother, or not polarity, life and death as formula of the Father, but simply a formula of continual growth. And a child grows in stages. It starts off totally helpless and cute and loving, and all the warm fuzzies that you get after the sort of physical trauma of birth, and this joyous awakening where both parents, are transformed by the addition of this new family member they've created. And then there's the terrible twos. Okay. Me, mine, gimme. Yeah, temper tantrums. Then the cruelty of pre-adolescence. And then the awkwardness of adolescence. Continual growth is a fluid, developing formula. And the early stage of that formula are terrifying. Can be violent, but still, in a sense, natural and necessary for a balanced development as the child grows into maturity. Crowley writes here in the chapter 7 thing here, remarks on the receiving the Liber Legis, on the conditions prevailing at the time of the writing, and on certain technical difficulties connected with the literary form of the book. Certain very serious questions have arisen with regard to the method by which this book was attained. I do not refer to those doubts, real or pretended, which hostility engenders, for all such are dispelled by study of the text. That's what I mean by just grow up and study the text. No forger could have prepared so complex a set of numerical and literal puzzles as to leave himself devoted to the solution for years after, or B, baffled by a simplicity which, when disclosed, leaves one gasping at its profundity, C, enlightened only by progressive initiation, or by accidental events apparently disconnected with the book. Every day, year after year after year, something happens every day in your life where snatches of the book of the law either make sense or inform your meditations or speculations or self-analysis. Same thing with the other holy books. It blows your mind. Get them in you first, and then watch them go to work. But I digress. Or D, hostile, bewildered, and careless, even in the face of independent testimony as to the power and clarity of the book, and of the fact that by its light other men have attained loftiest summits of initiation in a tithe of the time which history and experience would lead one to expect. And E, angrily unwilling to proceed with that part of the work appointed for him, which is detailed in chapter 3. even when the course of events on the planet, war, revolution, and the collapse of the social and religious systems of civilization proved plainly to him that whether he likes it or not, Ra-Ur-Kuit is indeed Lord of the Aeon. The crowned and conquering child whose innocence meant no more than inhuman cruelty and wantonly senseless destructiveness as he avenged Isis, our mother, the earth, and the heaven for the murder and mutilation of Osiris, man, her son. Now remember, he's writing this in around 1920. The War of 1914 to 18 and its sequels have proven even to the dullest statesman beyond the wit of even the most subtle, sophistical theologians to gloss that death is not an unmixed benefit either to the individual or the community. That force and fire of leaping manhood are more useful to a nation than cringing respectability and emasculate servility. That genius goes with courage and the sense of shame and guilt with defeatism. For these reasons, and many more I am certain, I, the beast, whose number is 666, that this third chapter of the book of the law is nothing less than the authentic word, the word of the Aeon, the truth about nature at this time on the planet. And with that, I will leave our marathon examination of the genesis of Liber Alvel Legis and Crowley's thoughts of it, at least as he was voicing them in around 1920. So tomorrow we'll start something else if you're still with us. And until then, it'll be Holy Tuesday on the Christian calendar tomorrow. Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.